Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. Welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody that is hopefully for somebody. I am your host, Kyle Naranya. Happy New Year. This marks the first episode of 2024, and to celebrate the end of 2023, I will be listing out my top 10 favorite films of the year, as well as finally reviewing the Doctor Who Christmas special, The Church on Abbey Road. Now, there will be no spoilers in my top 10 list, but for the Doctor Who Christmas special, the first full episode with Ncuti Gatwa as the 15th Doctor, there will be full spoilers. So if you have not watched it yet, make sure you have watched it before I get into that review. Starting off the episode, let's get into my top 10 of 2023.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year!
Now, before getting into my top 10, there are some honorable mentions. First off, I want to mention Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I think it's a very good conclusion while not giving closure to every single villain. I did really enjoy it, and I think it's my favorite of the trilogy in general. The other two films in honorable mentions are Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Unfortunate that they're not going to keep the Part 2 aspect of the next film, as I own the 4K, and it doesn't look like they're going to change the title for that, but that's neither here nor there. And the last honorable mention is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, the Hunger Games prequel, which was so good, I started listening to the books narrated by Tatiana Maslany. So that's something to be said because I have never read those books. So without further ado, let's get on to the top 10. In number 10, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I think this film manages to be an emotional climax to the character and a retirement of Indiana Jones and a return of Indiana Jones into glory. I really enjoyed the banter between Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Harrison Ford, and the emotional conclusion really did hit me in the heartstrings. So my number 10 is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Number 9 is The Creator. I think this film is going to do very well on streaming. It was a really thought-provoking blockbuster, which didn't cost as much as a typical blockbuster. It looked like a $300 million movie, but it wasn't. It cost about $80 million. I think Gareth Edwards did a really good job establishing an interesting world that felt very tactile to one that could be in our near future. And if you haven't seen it yet, it's one I really think you should check out. Number 8 is Iron Claw, a film I haven't had a chance yet to review on the podcast. It's a devastating drama with a career-defining performance from Zac Efron. I would not be surprised if he gets nominated for an Oscar for this performance. It's a very well put together film. It's crafted so well, and emotionally, it's truly devastating to see the Von Erich curse that may or may not exist. That's up to you. Number 7 is The Killer. Jermaine, I know you were waiting to see a review for this film. I really enjoyed The Killer from David Fincher on Netflix. Michael Fassbender's paranoia as this hitman, as the film starts to evolve and everything unfolds around him and his whole life unravels because of a failed assassination attempt, was really interesting. I think the gritty nature of the action is really captivating, and it is certainly a David Fincher film that I would recommend on streaming for everyone. Number 6 is Godzilla Minus One. I think that Godzilla works really well as a period piece, particularly after World War II, which was the reason the character was created to begin with. And seeing the Japanese public rally together to destroy Godzilla, who's a villain in this film, was really entertaining, as well as playing with the trauma of the main characters was really well executed human interactions that we don't necessarily get from monster films in general. Number 5 is Oppenheimer. I think this is one of my favorite Christopher Nolan films of all time. It obviously got swept up in the Barbenheimer hype, but it's a 3-hour drama that's thoroughly captivating. I would argue it's not as interesting after the bomb goes off. The politics of the Secret Service and security clearance may not necessarily hit for everybody, but it is definitely one of my favorite Nolan films, and I would not be surprised if Cillian Murphy gets nominated for lead and maybe even wins. Number 4 is the only Pixar hit this year, which is insane. Elemental was a phenomenal allegory for the immigrant experience, as well as the disparities amongst socioeconomic elements, being a metaphor for humans in general. I thought this film was really emotional, tells a very heartwarming tale, particularly of a relationship between an immigrant and her child who's not one. And that's a really cool dynamic. And I think it's much more universal given how it's elements instead of one particular group of people. I think you should check it out, particularly on streaming if you've missed it. Number 3 is Barbie, the highest grossing film of the year, a phenomenal film about the identity of a doll and what that means for society. What does that mean for her, and how does it represent women, and how has it represented women in pop culture? I absolutely love this film. I saw it twice. It was a cultural phenomenon that I certainly got swept up into. I wore pink. You saw my outfit for the review. It is easily one of my favorite films of the year. Number 2 is John Wick Chapter 4, what I'm hoping will be the conclusion to the John Wick franchise. Given how this concludes, I think the fact that they managed to make the 4th installment, in my opinion, the best of the tetralogy or quadrilogy, is something to be said. Donnie Yen was a phenomenal addition to this franchise, and it has a heartwarming conclusion that ends the war of John Wick against the world of assassins. Number 1 is easily my favorite film of the year. What I would be absolutely devastated if it does not get nominated for Best Picture this year. Could even win. It's possible. And that is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Easily the best film I saw this year. It shows what is possible in the realm of animation. Yes, animation is film, and this is the best Spider-Man movie ever made. It's one of the best movies of the year. In my opinion, it is the best film of the year. Okay, so that's my number 1. Starting from the bottom, just really quickly, if you didn't catch all of that. Number 10 is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Number 9, The Creator. Number 8, Iron Claw. Number 7, The Killer. Number 6, Godzilla Minus One. Number 5, Oppenheimer. Number 4, Elemental. Number 3, Barbie. Number 2, John Wick Chapter 4, and number 1, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. That's my top 10. Feel free to send yours in to any of the social medias for the podcast. I'd love to see what yours are. I know I've seen some of the guests on the show post theirs already. I'd love to see what yours is. If you're listening on Spotify, it'll probably be the question of the week, so you feel free to enter it in there. But if you want to send them to me directly on any of the social media platforms, that will work as well. So that wraps up my top 10 of 2023. Next, let's move into full spoiler conversation of Doctor Who Christmas special, The Church on Ruby Road.
What's your name?
Ruby? Ruby Sunday?
Hello, Ruby Sunday. And it's a Sunday right now. That's a coincidence. I'm the Doctor.
The Church on Ruby Road marks the first Christmas special in 6 years, obviously marking the return of Russell T Davies, as well as the first official full special / episode. Disney Plus lists this as Special 4, which I don't really understand, but I guess with international distribution marking this as the debut season 1 for Ncuti starting in May of 2024, which was announced at the end of this Christmas special. I guess that makes sense, but it's a nitpick. Doesn't really have anything to do with the actual episode. In terms of the actual special itself, there have been a number of Doctor introductions or regenerations on Christmas. We, of course, had 2 Christmas specials marking the end of Doctors with the time of the Doctor. And then I always forget Twice Upon a Time. It's right here in front of me with Peter Capaldi's. And only 2 that really were the introduction of the Doctor, that being Christmas Invasion with David Tennant, ironically. And then this one marking the debut of Ncuti Gatwa as the 15th Doctor. I quite enjoyed it. I liked the supernatural elements, having this integration with science fiction at the same time. It's a very thin line between supernatural elements as well and science fiction, but the way that Russell T Davies managed to blend these in together, I thought was really interesting, particularly with what we did see in Wild Blue Yonder, with bringing in a superstition and how that potentially was involved in allowing the Toymaker to come back into the Doctor Who universe. I found that really interesting. Elements that were teased in the specials, I don't think really have any relevance necessarily to this. There's certainly a lot of setup, particularly with who's Ruby's mother, as well as what's going to be going on with this doctor, particularly after his interactions with the toy maker and the Meep and the big boss. I'm guessing those are going to be kind of the main crux of what's propelling the story of I'm still calling it the 14th series, but I know Disney Plus says otherwise. In terms of the actual new cast, I really like the fact that we get Ruby Sunday being what they call in this a foundling, and somebody who has absolutely made the best of her situation. She's got a phenomenal foster mother in Carla, as well as Cherry, the two Sundays who are raising her. Blended families are becoming more and more frequently represented in mass media in general, and I really do appreciate that, because the typical father, mother, and typically it is a son and a daughter dynamic has been so played that one of the things I know Russell said in the Doctor Who Unleashed special for the Star Beast was normalizing things that are normal, but they become more normal the more you see them represented in film and television. And I really do appreciate that from him, particularly as one of the hosts of the Doctor Who podcast, in fact, actually grew up in foster care herself. Ruby Sunday, I had concerns that she was just going to be another Rose and not Rose Noble. That was a very different character than the initial Rose. I wanted to call her Rose Piper, but that's not right. Ruby Sunday as the new companion was a really interesting character. As I mentioned, being somebody who grew up in foster care, it gives her a more interesting dynamic than something we would have seen from Rose Tyler or Martha or even the Nobles. And I like the fact that it's clear she's made the best of her situation. One interesting thing that I'm sure will be a conversation topic, especially with classic Whovian fans, is that we see Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor in multiple outfits. Interestingly enough, the first thing we ever saw him wearing, that brown suit with the orange t-shirt, only appears once, and we do in fact see him in the leather overcoat with the jeans, the vest, and the classic sneakers underneath, or trainers, as they say in the show. And if that is his Doctor Who look, I think it really works. It's an interesting fusion of color, as well as it's fun to me that the first new Doctor that Russell T Davies is introducing also manages to also have a leather jacket. Of course, Christopher Eccleston had a black leather jacket in his version of the character, the Ninth Doctor. And so I'm interested to seeing if we do see more of that outfit carrying forward, or for a while are we not really going to lock in on what the 15th Doctor's look is. That being something that makes these Doctors more iconic is that they do have a signature look. So the fact that we don't really know what Ncuti Gatwa's is yet, I'm very curious and I'm optimistic to seeing what it is. If it is the leather coat, as I mentioned already, I think that does work for him, and it's a nice sense of flair while also adhering to some classic elements we've seen from Doctors in the past. The dynamic between the two of them was really entertaining. I think particularly Ncuti's relationship with her as it evolves, seeing the science and coincidence, but also the fact that, again, since I'm in full spoilers, talking about the ending in particular, which is he is the result of saving her life and putting her into foster care, given how he travels to when the mysterious Ruby mother has dropped her off at the church, what elements that potentially could lead to and what plot reveals could be around that. And the fact that he chose to still put her in foster care because of the resulting butterfly effect, if you will, it has on Carla and Cherry, I find really interesting. This more linear looper style of time travel elements is something I really appreciate, even though we've, from Russell's own mouth, have potentially had splits in the timeline because of the bi-generation. Now, I should say, even though he said that in one of the video commentaries on iPlayer, since that canonically has never been seen on screen, it's still just a theory of his until actually shown, and in my opinion, become concrete. So until then, I like that Doctor Who still at this point is following a more linear style of time travel. Another reference to the 60th anniversary specials we got in this was the use of the word Mavity, which I really hope keeps moving forward. Shout out to whoever's doing it on YouTube, but clips that had the word gravity in them have actually, in fact, had the word changed to Mavity, which I think is really, really funny. As a debut episode, I think this is a lot of fun. We certainly get to understand the different aspects of Ncuti Gatwa's version of the Doctor. I know there was concern from people that I've spoken to that it would just be Eric from Sex Education in the TARDIS. And I think I can quell those apprehensions because that is certainly not the case with this version of the Doctor. There's a lot more confidence and he's certainly more eccentric, but I think that commanding intelligence and maturity that you would expect from the Doctor is still presented here in his version of the character. I like the way that he interacts with everybody. Something I've read online, and I think it certainly does work with this episode, is it plays as if you've never seen the show before, as if you were watching Rose, the very first episode of the modern era of Doctor Who, that this is the, pun intended, regeneration of Doctor Who, or by generation, given what we experienced in the 60th anniversary special, The Giggle, that if you've never watched the show before, there's certainly a lot of teases to elements about the Doctor, but there are even elements that go against the norm. When we see Ruby enter the TARDIS for the first time, we don't get to see her really see the entire scale/scope of what the massive set is now for the TARDIS. We don't even hear her say any version of it's bigger on the inside. We get to see her circle the TARDIS once she's seen what's inside, but that's an element that I find really interesting, that they're saving her overall reaction to what lies before her in the upcoming season 1/series 14, which again was announced it's debuting in May, which is nice. I'm a little disappointed we're only getting 8 episodes, but as I've mentioned in the Doctor Who special reviews, given how we are getting bigger budgets and fewer episodes, I'm hoping that that balances out to maintain the standard of quality that we've now seen from all of the episodes of Doctor Who. Particularly in the visuals and what they're able to do. The flying pirate ship of the goblins was really cool. And then the spectacle of seeing all these small creatures surrounded in a set was certainly really fun to play with. I think fun is the best way to describe this Christmas special. It has the supernatural elements, as I mentioned, with the goblins, but it also manages to have all the touchstones of a Doctor Who introduction. As I said already, he has the different levels of outfits and costumes, but at the same time, he is a mystery to us, the audience, as well as to Ruby Sunday, and getting to experience her sort of put the pieces together as to who this Doctor is was a lot of fun to watch, and to see how the scope of what the goblins are able to do and how the stakes continually escalate as the episode goes along are really interesting. And one element that I noticed and I thought was really funny that Russell points out in the video commentary for this episode on the iPlayer is that the way that the Goblin King is dispatched is 100% a reference to The Little Mermaid and how Ursula was dispatched at the end of that 1989 animated film, both being stabbed by some form of structure. Ursula, of course, it being the ship in Little Mermaid, and then for the Goblin King, it's the top of the tower of the church that Ruby was abandoned to at the beginning of her life. Her birthday, of course, being Christmas Eve. I don't really know if there's much else to say about this episode, given how it's only really an introduction to our 2 main leads. Of course, there's some curiosity as to what could be revealed to do with, or who is the neighbor of the Ruby and the Sundays. That should be a band, if not already. Maybe a milkshake related band of some sort. I don't know, but that doesn't actually matter. I'm just rambling. And so there are certainly a lot of elements that I've referenced could be progressing us into what the main focus of season 1/series 14. I really like Ncuti's version of the character. It feels his own while also feeling like this is the next Doctor, which I really appreciate. And given how he's experiencing things that no other Doctor has experienced before, that with By Generation, knowing that there is another version of you in the current present we know doesn't come up, as Russell has said as such, but regardless, I really liked Ncuti Gatwa's portrayal of the Doctor so far. I don't think it's my favorite introduction. My favorite is the 11th Hour, followed by Christmas Invasion, followed by this, the Church on Ruby Road, followed by Deep Breath, and then followed by The Woman Who Fell to Earth. So that's how I would scale the introductions of the Doctors in general. I think it was an interesting debut, and I'm very excited to see what we get from the Doctor in the upcoming season. Well, I guess as you're listening to this year, it being 2024 now, when you are listening to this. That will do it for my Doctor Who review. Next, to wrap up the episode, I will tell you what you can look forward to in the upcoming month.
This is a ladder and just pops on. A ladder in the sky, and you thought, yeah, I'll give that a go, babe.
Thank you for listening to the Film Realist podcast. I enjoyed laying out my favorite films of the year. Again, if you're on Spotify or any of the social media platforms, let me know what your favorites were of the year. Before letting you know what you can look forward to this upcoming month, if you are listening to this week of release, this Friday, I will be on Movies to Watch Before You Die, where I joined Dylan and Gab to talk about The Mask of Zorro. You'll have to listen to the episode to find out if it is one to watch before you die. I really enjoyed being on that podcast, and if you're a fan of Jump on the Batwagon and you listen to me talk to Brian about the two Batman films, Dylan Pollock is the listener and has his own podcast with Gab. It's one I highly recommend you check out, so listen to that this upcoming Friday. For January, how typically it is a month where films go to die, I'm going to try to catch up on films I haven't had a chance to see yet the previous year to end December. Reviews I know you can look forward to are Ferrari and the musical remake of The Color Purple. I know I'm going to be seeing both of those, as well as reviewing Monarch, A Legacy of Monsters, which will wrap up in January. So those are reviews you can definitely look forward to. If things do change, of course, you can see those announcements on all sorts of different social media platforms. I am now personally Kyle Naranya on Blue Sky as well. So all the links to the social media are embedded in the episode, so you can find them all there. Please leave a 5-star review on your podcast platform. Be a Spotify follower. If you are listening to this because you listened to me review Rebel Moon, A Child of Fire with Stephen Colbert, thank you so much. That episode has done extraordinarily well, and I'm very grateful for that. We surpassed 1,000 listens in total, which is really exciting. I look forward to a new year of the podcast, and you can look forward to the same old, with sometimes the same old guests. That will do it for the Film Realist. I am Kyle Naranya. We'll see you next time.